We Christians are involved in a warfare. Jehovah's Christian witnesses are not pacifists. Yes, we're fighters, but we do not use carnal weapons. We do not own guns, but we do use an offensive weapon called the sword of the Spirit. Now, we have much to fight against. Matter of fact, there's three main things that we have to fight against. That's the devil's wicked system of things, the imperfect sinful flesh, Satan, the devil, and his demons. Jehovah has provided us three things to be able to be successful in this fight. That's Jehovah's Word, Jehovah's Holy Spirit, and his visible organization. Now, there are many things that we have to fight against if we want to win the fight. One was mentioned in 1 Timothy chapter 6, and we can review that scripture again to have it fresh in mind. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10, where Paul wrote that the love of money is the root of all sorts of injurious things, and by reaching out for this love, some have been led astray from the faith and have stabbed themselves all over with many pains. And so a Christian can be enticed to love money or things that money can buy. Material things, pleasures, recreation, entertainment, relaxation, and the such. It was stated interestingly enough, in our June the 1st, 1979 Watchtower on page 19, it says a host of sad experiences has shown that when purely recreational festivities are done on a regular basis, they have a tendency to gravitate toward worldliness. And we're also given this warning in the January 1st, 79 Watchtower, page 25 and 26. It says, in the more prosperous land, emphasis is often placed on material gain, pleasure, recreation, immorality, and so on. Doing your own thing. Sad to say, this satanic tide appears to have engulfed more of God's people than outright persecution. We should never want to let the world soften us to the point of habitually spending weekends on pleasure away from the congregation in God's service. And isn't it true that, you notice there's great temptation? California is outstanding for it, because in other places where it's more seasonal, it's not like party time all year long. But in California we have what? Fine weather all the time, all year long. Of course, some Christians feel that this is pioneer weather, whereas others might use it in another way. So fighting against that desire for worldliness is very, very important if we want to win this fight. Then again, we know we have an invisible, wicked force to fight against. That's Satan, the devil, and his demons. You know, many people don't even believe in the demons, which is fine with the devil, because one of the greatest ways to get your victim off guard is to have him believe that you don't exist. So if you have an enemy that doesn't exist, why should you be putting up a guard to fight against him? The Bible informs us otherwise. Matter of fact, in 2 Corinthians, in the 2nd chapter, and in the 11th verse, here's what Paul was able to write. He said that we may not be overreached by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his design. So it lets us know that we as servants of Jehovah, we don't have to be overwhelmed by Satan. Why? Because we know how he works. We know the tactics he uses. Why? Because the Bible tells us. We have many instances and examples in the Bible of this against the devil's scheme. So this is in effect telling us that the devil has no new bag of tricks. The devil uses what? The same old designs that he's been used before. Jehovah has brought these to our attention through his word, but we're not ignorant of the devil's design. Now the devil, of course, isn't dumb. He's been misleading mankind for some 6,000 years, and so he knows how to do it. And one of the devil's subtle designs is that he makes appear to us what is bad to look like it's good. He can think of things that are naturally attractive and pleasurable and get us desiring them, even though it's out of harmony with God's purpose. Take, for example, sex relations, where this is proper between husband and wife. He can get those who do not have such privileges of being married to each other to desire sex relations. Of course, he has many unnatural forms of desires that he causes people to develop the appetite for as well. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, we're given this warning about the devil in verse number 14, where we're told, says, no wonder, for Satan himself keeps transforming himself into an angel of light. Well, now you might say, well, how can the devil transform himself into an angel of light? Well, it's not a difficult task for the devil. He used to be an angel of light. And so therefore, when he projects schemes to mislead mankind, he makes them appear appealing. He can make something that Jehovah says is wrong appear to be right in the eyes of those who've been enticed by these desires. Now the devil is crafty, he's deceptive, he's the master of deception. And just the service of Jehovah has gold in mind, so also does Satan the devil. Now we can ask, well, what is one of the goals that Satan the devil has that could involve us? Well, all we have to do is ask the question, well, who do we feel will be targets of the devil? Well, it would have to be Jehovah's people. As you know, they sing that song, say, he got the whole world in his hand. And the Bible tells us that the whole world is lying in the power of the wickedness of Satan the devil. So who is it that he needs to attack? Who is it that he needs to subvert? Well, it's those who have escaped his clutches. That would be Jehovah's people. So we can see that we become targets of Satan the devil. Now, what is the devil's desire as far as we're concerned? We can say it could be twofold, one of two things. The devil would love to get us to stop serving Jehovah. And we can see he's been successful with some few to get them to stop serving Jehovah. But he knows that probably the great majority will never get to stop serving Jehovah. But then he has a secondary desire. And what is that? To get us to slow down in our service to Jehovah. Either of the two would be victories for the devil. If he gets us to stop, well then that would have been a great victory. If he gets us to slow down, that too would be a victory for the devil. Now, how would the devil get us to slow down in serving Jehovah? Well, probably if some minister of false religion was to come and say, why don't you stop going from house to house so much? Well, we probably would ignore it. Well, we would say, well, just for that I'm going to go more than I was going before. But he's not going to send the minister of false religion to encourage us to slow down. So now, who is it that we might listen to? Who is it that we might listen to? All right? Yes, one of our brothers and sisters right inside the Christian congregation. They can appeal to us, appeal to the lazy bones in our body, our fleshly, imperfect, fleshly, sinful inclination to get us to slow down in the service. And this has proved to be successful on the part of some who are not determined to live dedicated lives and giving their time and effort, energy, and help and strength in Jehovah's service. Why, this was brought to our attention recently in our May the 15th, 1984 Watchtower. You remember the article on balance? It gave a picture of a man riding a bicycle. It says one of the ways to get balance is riding a bicycle, not to be at a standstill, not just holding on, but moving forward. To show that we're going to be balanced in Jehovah's eyesight and working in Jehovah's organization, we must be constantly moving forward, constantly making progress. Our advancement should be really manifest to all persons, for all reasons. But there were some who the devil would use And they would come up to you and say something like this, quoting from that May 15th Watch Tower on page 10. It says, be balanced. Don't spend so much time in the field ministry. Spend more time at home with your family. The Watchtower told us, sad to say, some listen to such bad advice to great spiritual harm to themselves and their family. See, if you read it in the Bible, it never tells servants of Jehovah to slow down in the service, but it tells us to figure out ways to do more in Jehovah's service. So then, when one of our brothers and sisters comes to us and tells us to slow down in our service, we in effect should tell them, get behind me, Satan. Because it is written, it's Jehovah God that we to him alone we must render sacred service. In 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 11, we find good admonition given to us by Peter. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 11. He was talking about the doing away with this old system and the bringing on of the new system. But notice what he said in verse 11. He says, since all these things are thus to be dissolved, what sort of persons ought you to be in holy acts of conduct and deeds of godly devotion? All right, so in other words, while we're looking to the end of this system, he mentioned two things, holy acts of conduct and deeds of godly devotion. Well, we should know what the holy acts of conduct should involve. That's what? Living clean, moral lives. The world is filled with all kind of perversion, all kind of immorality, even adults getting sexually involved with little kids, all kind of disgusting. But as far as Jehovah's servants, holy acts of conduct. If you think about the word holy, it really means untarnished, undefiled, chaste. And so that's the kind of conduct that all must maintain to remain a part of Jehovah's clean organization. But some might say, well, isn't it true that there's some people in the world that live clean lives, don't get themselves involved in immoral things? Well, that's true. So you see, it takes more than that then to identify a person as what's fighting in this spiritual fight to win. So more than holy acts of conduct, you also mentioned deeds of godly devotion. When we use the expression deeds, we're talking about action. We're talking about doing something, aren't we? And what is it that we would be doing? We'd be doing acts of godly devotion. And what does godly devotion mean? It means a life devoted to Jehovah. That's talking about a dedicated relationship. So there should be no question then as to how we're using our lives if we want to win this fight. The way we will use our lives is in devotion to Jehovah. And we call it sacred service. It's a sacred privilege to serve Jehovah. So we don't want to be one of those that the devil uses as a tool to bring about discouragement, nor do we want ourselves to be allowed to be discouraged by someone who the devil is using as a tool to discourage us when we're encouraged to exert ourselves in Jehovah's service. To be totally immersed in Jehovah's service. Our whole life should be what? Wrapped around Jehovah's service. Because if our life is not wrapped around Jehovah's service, there's only one thing left. To be wrapped up with the world. To die. Sometimes a person will come to you and say, yeah, but you got to count the cost. What they're trying to tell you is, well, think twice before you think about serving Jehovah wholeheartedly. But we can say this. We know serving Jehovah is going to cost us plenty. And we already counted the cost, and we say we will have committed ourselves to pay the price when we approach Jehovah in dedication. Got that time. So we're not looking to slide on into the new order without it costing us something. It will cost us plenty. It could cost us our life. It could cost us our financial resources. But then, that's not a high price to pay to have a relationship with our Heavenly Father, Jehovah. Yes, we do count the cost. What would it cost? Giving up a life of filth, of immorality, deception of Babylon the Great, a selfish commercial way of life, where we can have in place following the footsteps of Jesus Christ, showing love. That's what the kind of life is. Replacing that selfish, reducing way of life. A life of vanity, which even if successful, only leads to unhappiness. Whereas with little or much, we can serve Jehovah with joy in our heart. So we count the cost. We know it's going to cost us plenty, but we gladly pay the price. We gladly pay the price. So then, what about those deeds of godly devotion? Deeds of godly devotion, action. Because it's exercising faith in doing something in Jehovah's service. So we've been encouraged by Jehovah's organization to arrange our affairs to be in the full-time service, be in the forefront. Just like those singers in ancient times. They were called the pioneers. In the forefront, where the action is. Rather than a spectator on the side watching it happen, though they're really involved making it happen. We want to be tools of Jehovah, not tools of the devil. So we involve ourselves in those deeds of godly devotion, which means that we'll be living up to what our dedication means. Now, one of the things that the devil uses successfully too is something called gradualism. In other words, to separate you from Jehovah, he knows he can't just snatch you away, because you would resist it. So what he does is does it gradually. Kind of like to say, you know how you cook a frog? You don't just dump him in the hot water, because you know what'll happen? He'll hop out. You know, you just turn the fire down real low. Gradually you cook it. You just go and go to sleep. After a while, you got a cooked frog. So the devil knows that. He doesn't try to just snatch you away from Jehovah, but gradually tries to wean you away from Jehovah. Just a little bit at a time, just a little bit at a time. Get you to miss a meeting here and there. Get you to spend just a little bit less time in the service. I remember the time when Jehovah's Witnesses used to go out in field service. No witness would go out in field service for less than 3 hours. They thought that, well, you must be spiritually sick. But now, gotten some down that they feel good going out. They got an hour, even a little. Well, I already put in an hour. I'm going now. And where are they going? They have nothing to do. They're not going to work. Gradually. Did you ever watch a tree grow? Did you ever watch a tree grow? Well, probably you just didn't stand there and look at it. But did you know that the tree is growing every second? Every second that tree is growing. As long as it's alive, that tree is growing every second. But you might say it's so slow I can't see it. Something like a child. So your own child, you have your child, you see the child every day. It looks like the same child it looked like yesterday. But what about if you didn't see that child for 6 months or a year or two? You said, my, the child has grown. He has? Oh yeah, he has. And you might have to look at some pictures. Yeah, this is how he was when he was 1. Now he's 2, now he's 3, now he's 4, now he's 5. And you can see the growth. It's gradual. You can't hardly tell when it's gradual. The devil uses gradually. Gradually get you to do less and less in Jehovah's service. To do less with personal study. To do less with ministry. Because they look at it as a burden to go out and be obligated to spend time with conducting a Bible study, teaching somebody the truth. Did you know that there's many persons been in the truth that never ever had a Bible study? Never ever tried to make a disciple? Did you know that? Did you believe that? There's some people in Jehovah's organization right now that never ever had a Bible study. There's some people in Jehovah's organization right now, even though they're dedicated and baptized, they never ever engaged in auxiliary pioneering. Can you believe that? Look at our 1984 calendar. You know what we see in our 1984 calendar, those pictures? These are other countries outside the United States. But there we find brothers and sisters serving Jehovah under adverse, dangerous circumstances. See, they're not going to let the violence that they have to work under cause them to stop serving Jehovah. But we in this country, what do we know about persecution? There's been no persecution in this country for over 40 years. I was persecuted. What happened? Well, they told me they was not interested. How devastating. Yeah. how come there's been no persecution in this country for over 40 years? You think the devil loves us? And he says, well, I don't want to, make it hard for you. Because the devil is smart. The devil is smart. He knows he can win many, many more. But it's preoccupied about even sleeping. And while we're sleeping, he takes us away from Jehovah. We don't even know. Like I heard a report about this sister from Poland. She came over to the United States with her son from Poland. And conditions in Poland, we would say, are very devastating, very difficult. For worldly people, for Jehovah servants too. But she saw her son being won over by the world, and she was ready to go back to Poland. Because she said there, she could see the enemy and could take a firm stand. But over here, she could see that she was losing her son. She went back to Poland, even under those hard circumstances. We can hear reports like that and say, good for that sister. But I'm staying here in this country, where the devil can lull me to sleep if I let him. There's one way we can keep awake. That's busy in Jehovah's service. Then we'll not allow ourselves to be lulled. Now, the devil has all kinds of traps. And one thing about a trap, if it's going to be any good, it has to be attractive. It has to be deceptive. It has to be subtle. For example, if you're going to catch a mouse, well, now what is the mouse like? He likes cheese. Okay, give me some cheese. So now the mouse comes and goes, ooh, cheese. The next thing you know, the trap springs and he's caught. And so the devil can trap us by what? Looks good to us. Looks fine on the surface. Doesn't see anything wrong. No danger. So that's what the devil knows is successful for us to have a trap. Now take, for example, in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, let's notice the warning that was given as far as that applies to our time. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. It says, however, the inspired utterance says definitely that in the latter periods of time, some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to misleading inspired utterances and teachings of demons. So it's telling us that in the last days, the demons would call some of Jehovah's servants to fall away from the faith. To fall away from the faith, you have to first of all be in the faith. That's talking about what? Us. There's a danger of us falling away from the faith, being deceived by the demons, and have so many demons. Now you say, well, that couldn't happen to me because I know the truth, I know Jehovah, and, well, it takes more than knowledge. You know what that scripture says in James chapter 2, verse 19? It says, believe there's one God, you're doing quite well, but the demons believe it too. You know, not an atheist among the demons, not an agnostic among the demons. They believe in Jehovah, but does that mean salvation for them? Certainly not. So you see, more than knowledge is needed to know about Jehovah. We must be what? Exercising faith. See, the demons don't have faith in Jehovah. So we must not have more than knowledge. We must be exercising that faith. When you talk about exercise, that means action. That means movement, not being at a standstill. Here's a statement that was made in Watchtower, March the 15th, 1963, on page 188. It says, if one's life is not filled with Jehovah's Spirit, it is likely to be taken over by a demon spirit. So here we are, targets of the devil, and we let a vacuum come. We start studying less. We start going to the meetings less. We start going out in service less. And then, almost like a magnet, we'll be attracting the devil in our spiritually weakened condition. And certainly we wouldn't expect Jehovah's protection and blessing on us when we have chosen to turn our back on him. Now, the devil can use us, dedicated Christians. For example, in the scripture at Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 26, Jehovah the Lord to the nation of Israel, speaking about those idols, he says, you should not bring a disgusting thing into your house. Well, what about us? Have we done that? The faithful slave has given us much warning. They told us about various idols, human idols that we can be worshiping. They can be entertainers, they can be movie stars, they can be sports heroes. We have them in our house, we have it in our mind, we have them in our heart. Remember that picture was in the Watchtower about music? It showed that young man, he was in his room with his guitar, and there was his record album. And what was on the wall, that picture? Was his idol. Those entertainers. So someone was to come, one of the elders, or two of the elders, let's say. If two of the elders were to come in your home today and say, we just came to see if we can help you to see if your house is in good spiritual order, would you welcome them in? And they said, we want to examine your record collection. You know those albums that your children have and you have in the home? We just want to look them over and see what you have. And you say, sure, brother, here they are right here. Or would you say, well, look, I'm kind of sick today. Can you come back another time? And they say, well, I would like to look and see your children's room, the way they're decorated. You don't mind if I step in there and look, do you? Would you say, well, sure, brother, there it is. Would you say, untidy. You don't have to look at it right now, do you? See, are we responding to counsel coming from Jehovah's organization? And what about guns? What about guns? They brought to our attention that we don't learn war anymore. We don't have implements of physical, carnal offense in our possession. You welcome the brothers into your home. Say, well, brothers, spiritually clean. Come in. You see, Jehovah's given us counsel to his organization. But some of us can be rebellious to counsel. Some of us can be independent thinkers. Something like Adam and Eve. Jehovah gave them the law. They decided for themselves what was right and what was wrong. As one Watchtower last year said, March 1st last year said, there is really no gray area between God's organization and Satan's organization. There is no gray area. So we should come up with, well, my conscience allows me to do so and so, as if that means it's all right in Jehovah's eyes. Our conscience could be what? Our conscience could be warped, it could be defiled, it could be seared, it could be ruined. That's why we could say, my conscience allows me to do this or that. Now, for example, this is an experience that was related in the March 1563 Watchtower on page 188. To show you how some persons, even though they know right or wrong, no Bible principles, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. Show you the result. It says one professing Christian, notice how they use the term professing Christian. One professing Christian married an unbeliever in defiance of 1 Corinthians 7:39, which we know it says, marry whom you Lord. And 2 Corinthians 6:14, which we know says, do not become unbelieving, yoked to unbelievers. It says this person's unbelieving marriage mate had a close relative that practiced demonism, who cast a spell on the professing Christian with lamentable physical damage. So the question was asked, how could such a rebellious one expect divine protection? Do you think Jehovah was going to protect this person when they knew that here the scripture says, do not be unevenly yoked, and they found this good worldly person? Do you think Jehovah was going to protect that professing Christian? Certainly not. But when the demon attacked, it was no different. So then, we don't want to follow along the independent thinking, nor do we want to be influenced by our negative brothers and sisters that we might find somewhere in Jehovah's organization. It's like we've been giving counsel about electronic TV games. Look, I don't have the kinds of violence, killing and the bombs and the shooting and the destruction. No, I don't have those kinds. I have the innocent ones. Well, you can ask the question, is there anything wrong with the innocent ones? Squandering Jehovah's dedicated time. See, one thing, anybody who who's ever played on any of these electronic games, they have to confess that it takes up enormous amounts of time, dedicated time that a Christian cannot afford to squander. Because when you start playing these games, either you're going to be good at it or you're going to be bad. If you're bad, you're going to say, I need to practice. And if you're good, you say, I'm good, I can be the best. And either way, it's going to what? Take up enormous amounts of time. That's why many Christians don't even have such a number. I was in a Christian home one time, and I looked on the shelf. I said, what a big library. I thought they were books. They weren't books. No. Those games, you stick a different one, you got a different game. You stick another one, you got a different game. Can you imagine if you spent even 5 minutes playing one of those games each, how much time you squander Jehovah's dedicated time? Some Christians got cable TV coming into the house. All the channels, there's not enough. We need more. Well, I like sports. I want to see sports. Too much sports on TV now. Like one elder, he told me, he was honest and told me he had cable TV. So he was going to take his wife out for dinner. And so he got a babysitter to take care of the children while he was gone. This was one of the witnesses' daughters. He said when he came back home at night, everybody was asleep, with the TV on, had one of those immoral programs on. He said the next day he got that cable TV out of his house. He said she was sleeping so she could act like she wasn't seeing it, but he felt responsible. Why? Because he had that cable coming. So, see, without getting the extra channels, because there's too much on there now that a Christian would have to squander that dedicated time. And then what about wedding reception? Did we get counsel about weddings and wedding receptions? And about the kind of music that should be involved in the wedding reception? And how that the wedding shouldn't be a show? You shouldn't be sure what kind of outlandish costumes you can invent. The main emphasis should be on what? The main emphasis should be on that scriptural talk that brother is giving. And paying close attention to that scriptural talk that brother is giving. And after having a fine talk at the Kingdom Hall, this should not be ruined by a worldly wild wedding reception with no abandon, with such things as disco music that the faithful slaves have already exposed as being coming from the homosexual community. Well, what about encouragement to pioneer? Did you know that the faithful slave has been encouraging us to pioneer? Do you smile every time when you see in the Watchtower pioneer, in the Kingdom Ministry pioneer, at the Circuit Assembly here pioneer, at the District Conventions pioneer, or do you cringe and say they're mentioning that word again, pioneer? Well, if you don't like that word, you'll be most uncomfortable now when you start picking up the Watchtower. When you get your latest Kingdom Ministry, when you come to the next meeting, or the next assembly, or the next convention, or you talk to some of your zealous brothers and sisters, you'll be most uncomfortable. So if you're determined to be in the thick of the fight, in the forefront of the fight, then you can appreciate that pioneering what Jehovah wants me to do. You can be unafraid in approaching the piano and taking an application and looking it over and reading it and becoming familiar with what the requirements are. It might be that you don't qualify yet, but then that doesn't mean that you can work to improve the situation where the elders would be glad to recommend you to the society as a regular life. And for those who are able to get started in the pioneer service as of September 1st, then they can have the grand blessing and privilege of next August of attending the pioneer service school, like many have done this year. How many attended the pioneer service school this year? All right, look at all the hands. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? We give them a big hand. We could just ask one of the pioneers to put their hand up. What do you think about the pioneer service? All right, sis, you tell us. All right, fine. And okay, sis. All right, yes. Any other expression? All right, yes. But you know what you got to do to get them to share that, enjoy that? You encourage them to go to the piano. See, one of the effects that the Pioneer Service School would have on you, one of the effects that the Pioneer Service School will have on you, it will draw you closer to Jehovah. You go to Pioneer School as a good pioneer because you've already had at least 1 year pioneering in your life. But you go to Pioneer School as a good pioneer, you come out as a much better pioneer. But you're closer to Jehovah, much higher skilled as far as being able to handle yourself out in the ministry. I've talked to elders. See, elders have always been going to school for Kingdom Ministry School. I've talked to elders who are pioneers. And they say they've been to Kingdom Ministry School, they've been to Pioneer Service School, they enjoy the Pioneer Service School more. See, because when we go to Kingdom Ministry School, we learn how to handle problems. Go to Pioneer Service School, we learn how to help people. That's very much joyful. So you don't have to miss out on the blessings that you might be qualified for even at this time. They were told that it's not sufficient for us to avoid wrong. We have to love what is right and hate what is wrong. And so, you see, when we think about that word dedication, we want to understand what that word dedication means. For example, you might see a girl over here, and that girl is an ice skater. That girl over here, you say she's a dedicated ice skater. Now, what's the difference? Well, both of them skate every day. Both of them enjoy skating. Both of them are good at it. But this one spends maybe 1 or 2 hours a day ice skating. This one maybe 6 to 8 hours a day ice skating. That's dedicated ice skating. So we can use the expression, well, I'm a dedicated witness of Jehovah. But what does that mean? That we go out, the first Sunday of every month? Second and fourth Saturday? Or is it that we're going to be using time every day in Jehovah's service? Certainly that's hope, understanding that we have in our mind. To build ourselves to be spiritually strong so that we can be determined that we're going to win that fight. As 1 Timothy chapter 6 says, in verse 11 and 12, he says, however, you, O man of God, flee from these things. And that's the things he just got through talking about. The loving of money and the things that would be deterring a person's way, leading them away from the faith. He says, flee from these things, but pursue righteousness, godly devotion, faith, love, endurance, mildness of temper. Yes, when he says pursue, if we were to look up a definition for the word pursue, it means to chase after with the intent of overtaking. Not just chasing after, like a person running after the elusive butterfly, never to ever catch him. And he says in verse 12, fight the fine fight of the faith. Get a firm hold on the everlasting life for which you were called, and you offered a fine public declaration in front of many witnesses. So, we can ask the question, will you win the fight? You can say yes, with the help of Jehovah's Spirit, His Word, and His organization, we know that you can.